Humanity does not arrive on Pandora driven by wonder, curiosity, or the spirit of exploration. It arrives because Earth is no longer a home. The planet that once nurtured civilization has been stripped down to its bones, exhausted by centuries of unchecked consumption, endless conflict, and collective short-sightedness. Cities sprawl endlessly beneath polluted skies. Resources have dwindled to the point of desperation, and survival itself has become a privilege rather than a certainty. This is the quiet, suffocating reality from which the story of Avatar begins. Not with hope, but with decay. In that collapsing world lives Jake Sully. He is not a hero in the traditional sense, nor is he introduced as one. Jake is a former Marine, trained for combat, conditioned to follow orders, and shaped by war long before the story truly begins. An injury has left him paralyzed from the waist down, confined to a wheelchair, and effectively discarded by the very system that once relied on him. There is no grand ceremony, no promise of redemption waiting for him on Earth. There is only a small monthly check, a broken body, and a life moving steadily toward irrelevance. Jake's paralysis is more than physical. It represents a deeper fracture within him. His sense of identity, once built around purpose and service, has collapsed alongside his mobility. He survives day to day, drifting through a world that no longer needs him, carrying the quiet anger and resignation of someone who has been left behind. When we meet him, Jake is not searching for meaning. He has stopped believing meaning is something he deserves. It is in this fragile state that opportunity finds him, though it comes dressed in indifference rather than compassion. Jake's twin brother, a scientist working on the Avatar program, has been killed during a robbery. His death is not mourned by institutions, only managed. To the Resources Development Administration, Jake's value lies solely in his identical genetic makeup. He is a replacement component, a spare part that can prevent an expensive investment from going to waste. The offer placed before Jake is simple and brutally transactional. Travel to Pandora. Take your brother's place. Operate an avatar body. Follow instructions. In return, you will receive compensation beyond anything Earth can offer you now. And hanging quietly behind that offer is an unspoken promise. One that matters more than money. The possibility of walking again. Not metaphorically, not symbolically, but literally, feeling the ground beneath his feet. Jake does not hesitate. He does not weigh ethics or question motives. From his perspective, there is nothing left to protect on Earth. Accepting the mission is not an act of ambition or courage. It is an act of surrender. Pandora represents escape, not enlightenment. A way out of a life that has already ended. The journey itself underscores the vast distance between humanity's technological triumphs and its moral failures. Cryogenic sleep, interstellar travel, machines capable of sustaining life across unimaginable distances. Humanity can cross stars, yet cannot save its own world. When Jake awakens months later, Pandora greets him not with warmth, but with warning. The air is toxic. The environment is hostile. Survival requires machinery, protocols, and constant vigilance. From the very first breath, Pandora makes one truth clear. Humans do not belong here. And yet, beneath that hostility lies beauty so overwhelming it borders on the unreal. Pandora is alive in a way Earth no longer is. Its ecosystems are vibrant, responsive, interconnected. This contrast is not subtle. It is deliberate. Earth is a monument to what humanity has taken. Pandora is a reminder of what humanity no longer understands. Jake's introduction to the Avatar body becomes the emotional core of this opening chapter. When his consciousness first synchronizes with the Na'vi form, the reaction is immediate and visceral. He stands, he runs, he laughs. The joy is raw and unfiltered, almost childlike. For the first time since his injury, his body responds to his will without pain or limitation. This moment is not framed as power, but as relief. Jake is not thrilled by strength. He is overwhelmed by normalcy. This rebirth, however, comes with conditions. The avatar body is not freedom. It is borrowed flesh, tethered to machines, monitored by scientists, and ultimately controlled by corporate and military interests. Jake is reminded constantly that his ability to walk exists only within this artificial boundary. When he disconnects, reality returns, cold and immovable. The wheelchair waits. What makes this beginning so effective is that it does not ask the audience to immediately judge Jake. He is not portrayed as noble or selfish, enlightened or ignorant. He is human in the most unglamorous sense. He follows orders because that is what he has always been trained to do. He accepts the mission because refusing it would mean returning to nothing. His moral compass has not failed him yet. It has simply not been tested. Pandora, at this stage, is merely a backdrop. The Na'vi are an unknown variable. The conflict has not ignited. What matters is the internal state of the man at the center of the story. Jake arrives broken, carrying the weight of a dying planet and a discarded life. He believes he is here to observe, to report, to survive. He does not yet understand that Pandora will demand more than obedience. It will demand choice. This is the foundation upon which everything else is built. Before the battles, before the spiritual awakening, before the war between worlds, there is a man who has lost his place in one world and has not yet earned a place in another. Avatar does not begin with destiny. It begins with emptiness. And it is precisely that emptiness that allows Jake Sully's transformation to feel earned, painful, and ultimately inevitable. Pandora is not introduced as a setting. It is revealed as a presence. From the moment the human ships pierce its atmosphere, the moon asserts itself as something fundamentally different from every world humanity has ever touched. This is not a place that waits to be explored. It watches. It reacts. It resists. Pandora does not exist to be conquered, catalogued, or claimed. It exists on its own terms, and everything about it reminds the audience of that truth. Visually, Pandora feels almost overwhelming. Forests stretch endlessly beneath alien skies, their colors rich and luminous, glowing softly as darkness falls. Plants respond to touch, folding inward as if aware of intrusion. Mountains float suspended in open air, defying gravity without explanation, as though the planet itself has chosen which rules to obey and which to ignore. Even the smallest details, from drifting spores to bioluminescent roots beneath the soil, reinforce the same idea. Nothing here is static. Nothing is passive. Pandora is alive in a way Earth has forgotten how to be. For the humans stationed there, this vitality is both fascinating and deeply inconvenient. The atmosphere is lethal, forcing them to rely on masks and machinery just to breathe. The wildlife is powerful, territorial, and unapologetically dangerous. Survival is not granted by technology alone. It demands respect, caution, and understanding, qualities the human presence largely lacks. Where Earth was shaped to fit human needs, Pandora refuses to bend. At the heart of this world live the Na'vi. Tall, graceful, and physically formidable, they are often described by human observers in terms of biology and function. Their height, their strength, their neural cues, their compatibility with the planet's fauna. But such descriptions miss the point entirely. The Na'vi are not impressive because of how they look. They are remarkable because of how they live. To the Na'vi, Pandora is not a resource. It is a network. Every living thing is connected through Eywa, the planetary consciousness that binds flora, fauna, and people into a single system. This belief is not presented as myth or superstition. It is shown repeatedly through action. The Na'vi connect with animals through Tsahelu, forming bonds that are not about domination, but mutual understanding. They commune with the memories of their ancestors through sacred trees, preserving history not in written records, but in living memory. Life, to them, is not owned, it is borrowed. Death is not an end, but a return. These ideas are woven into every aspect of their culture, from hunting rituals to language, from communal living to spiritual practice. The phrase, "I see you," is not a greeting. It is an acknowledgement of existence, of presence, of shared being. It means recognition at the deepest level, something far more profound than observation. This worldview stands in direct opposition to the human approach on Pandora. The Resources Development Administration does not see a living system. It sees deposits, yields, and profit margins. The forest is an obstacle. The Na'vi are a complication. Eywa is dismissed as a belief that can be ignored because it cannot be measured or monetized. The human mindset remains rooted in Earth's failures, applying the same logic that destroyed one planet to another that has not yet been broken. Pandora, however, responds. It is not immediately hostile, but it is not forgiving either. Predators attack. When boundaries are crossed, the environment punishes carelessness. Survival requires harmony, not control. This creates a constant tension for Jake Sully as he begins operating within the world. Through the avatar body, he can move freely, but freedom alone is not enough. Pandora does not reward presence. It rewards balance. The contrast between human encampments and the Na'vi villages could not be clearer. Human bases are metallic, rigid, isolated from the environment they occupy. They hum with machinery and artificial light, sealed off from the living world outside. Na'vi settlements, by contrast, grow from the land itself. They are organic, adaptive, and seamlessly integrated into their surroundings. Nothing feels imposed. Everything feels earned. This difference is not merely aesthetic. It reflects two fundamentally incompatible philosophies. One sees the world as something to be used. The other sees the world as something to belong to. Avatar does not ask the audience to choose immediately between these perspectives, but it does make one thing unmistakable. Only one of them can exist without destroying the other. Pandora's role in the story is therefore not passive. It shapes behavior. It tests intention. It amplifies consequence. When humans act with force, Pandora pushes back. When the Na'vi act in harmony, the planet responds in kind. This dynamic becomes increasingly important as the narrative unfolds, but even in this early stage, the groundwork is clear. Pandora is not neutral territory. It has a stake in what happens. For Jake, this world represents both possibility and threat. Through the avatar body, he experiences Pandora as something exhilarating and terrifying. Every step through the jungle is a lesson. Every encounter carries risk. Unlike Earth, where danger has been industrialized and distant, Pandora's dangers are immediate and personal. There are no safe zones, no illusions of control. Yet beneath that danger lies something Jake has not felt in a long time: purpose. Pandora demands attention. It demands awareness. It demands presence. In a world where Jake's existence had been reduced to survival, Pandora challenges him to participate. This is what makes Pandora so compelling as a narrative force. It is not paradise, nor is it hell. It is a living world with its own rules, its own memory, and its own limits. It does not care about human ambition. but it reacts to human action. And in doing so, it exposes the lie at the center of the human mission, the belief that another world can be taken without consequence. By the end of this chapter, Pandora is no longer just the backdrop for Jake Sully's journey. It is the mirror through which humanity's failures are reflected and the stage upon which a different way of living is quietly, powerfully asserted. The world breathes, the world watches, and soon it will demand an answer. The Avatar program stands as humanity's most ambitious compromise, a solution born not from humility, but from necessity. Pandora cannot be conquered directly. Its air is poisonous, its wildlife lethal, and its terrain hostile to prolonged human presence. Instead of adapting themselves to the world, humans choose to remake bodies that can survive it. These avatars are not symbols of unity. They are tools, engineered to bypass nature rather than understand it. For Jake Sully, the program offers something no technology on Earth ever could. When he enters the avatar body, he is no longer defined by absence or limitation. He moves with strength and balance, his senses sharpened, his body fully responsive. The joy is immediate and uncontrollable, not because he has gained power, but because he has regained normalcy. For Jake, walking is not a miracle. It is a memory restored. Yet this rebirth comes with invisible restraints. Every moment inside the avatar is temporary, dependent on machines, technicians, and authorization. Jake's consciousness travels between two bodies, but only one of them truly belongs to him. The human body remains broken and waiting. The avatar body, powerful and whole, belongs to the program. Between these two states, Jake begins to live a divided existence, one foot in freedom, the other anchored to obligation. The Avatar program is presented as a scientific endeavor, overseen by researchers who genuinely wish to learn from Pandora rather than exploit it. Figures like Dr. Grace Augustine represent a fragile hope that knowledge and coexistence might prevail. Her research focuses on language, culture, and connection. She believes that understanding the Na'vi could prevent conflict. But even within her lab, idealism survives only at the mercy of funding and oversight. Science here does not lead, it negotiates. Above the research team looms the military and corporate command structure, where patience is short and objectives are clear. The avatar bodies are valuable not because they foster peace, but because they can move unseen among the Na'vi. This is where Jake's role becomes more complicated. He is encouraged to observe, to learn, and to report. Information is currency, and Jake is expected to pay his share. At first, the task feels simple. Jake has followed orders his entire life. Reporting what he sees feels no different from any reconnaissance mission he has ever undertaken. The Na'vi are unfamiliar, their customs strange, but Jake views them through a professional distance. He is a guest, a temporary presence, someone passing through. The conflict begins quietly, not with weapons, but with awareness. The more time Jake spends in the avatar body, the harder it becomes to see Pandora as a mission parameter. Sensations that were once muted now feel vivid and immediate. The ground responds beneath his feet. The forest listens. The world reacts to his presence. For the first time in years, Jake is not observing life from the outside. He is inside it. This dual existence creates a growing tension that no one else fully understands. When Jake returns to his human body, the transition is jarring. The loss of sensation is abrupt. The confinement returns. The difference between the two lives becomes impossible to ignore. One body moves through a living world. The other exists in a sterile room surrounded by metal and glass. One feels real. The other feels like exile. The Avatar program, by design, treats this division as manageable. Switches are flipped, reports are filed, data is logged, but the human mind is not built for such clean separations. Memories blur, emotions carry over. Jake begins to think like someone who belongs to Pandora, even while being asked to act as an outsider. The program did not anticipate loyalty forming where curiosity was expected. What makes this internal struggle compelling is that Jake does not immediately resist his role. He does not rebel or question authority in grand gestures. Instead, he drifts. He delays reports. He frames observations with softer language. He begins to omit details that feel too personal, too sacred to reduce to strategy. These are small choices, but they mark the beginning of a shift that cannot be reversed. The Avatar program promised access without consequence. It assumed that humans could step into another world, take what they needed, and step back out, unchanged. Jake's experience proves that assumption false. Living two lives does not create balance. It creates fracture. Every day Jake spends among the Na'vi pulls him further from the certainty of his former identity. Every night he returns to the human base feeling more disconnected than before. This fracture is not presented as weakness. It is presented as humanity. Jake is not betraying orders out of malice or ambition. He is responding to truth as he experiences it. Pandora is not an abstraction to him. It is a place where his actions matter, where his presence has weight. The Avatar body does not just give him mobility, it gives him accountability. The program's greatest failure lies in its inability to recognize this transformation. To those in power, the Avatars remain assets. Jake remains a soldier. Pandora remains a target. They believe control exists because they control the machines. They do not see that control has already begun to slip. By the end of this chapter, Jake Sully is no longer simply operating an avatar. He is inhabiting a question. Can a person live between two worlds without choosing one? Can loyalty be divided without consequence? The Avatar program was never designed to ask these questions. It was designed to delay conflict. But in giving Jake a second life, it has unknowingly set him on a path where neutrality becomes impossible. Living two lives is not sustainable. Eventually, one must become real. And Pandora, quietly and patiently, is already making its claim. Jake Sully does not begin his education among the Na'vi as a willing student. He arrives as a liability, lost in the forest, clumsy in his borrowed body, ignorant of the rules that govern Pandora's living systems. He survives his first night only because someone else intervenes. That someone is Neytiri. She does not save him out of kindness, nor curiosity, nor trust. She saves him because Eywa sends a sign. And among the Na'vi, signs are not debated, they are obeyed. From this moment onward, Jake's fate is no longer guided by human authority. It is shaped by a worldview he does not yet understand. Neytiri becomes his teacher not by choice, but by obligation. She sees Jake as a child trapped in an adult body, reckless and loud, incapable of listening to the forest around him. Her lessons are not gentle, they are corrective. Every misstep is met with frustration. Every careless movement is a reminder that Pandora is not forgiving to those who treat it like a playground. Jake must unlearn the habits of a soldier who moves to dominate space, and learn instead how to move through it without disturbance. This is not merely physical training. It is the dismantling of instinct. The Na'vi way of life is rooted in attention. To walk through the forest without awareness is an insult. To take a life without gratitude is a violation. To exist without understanding connection is to live blindly. Neytiri does not explain these principles through abstract philosophy. She teaches them through repetition, correction, and consequence. Jake learns to place his feet carefully. He learns to listen before acting. He learns that strength, in this world, is measured by restraint as much as force. What makes this process transformative is that the forest responds. Pandora reacts to Jake differently as his behavior changes. When he moves without purpose, the environment resists him. When he slows down, listens, adapts, the world opens itself just enough to allow passage. This is not mysticism presented as metaphor. It is a functional relationship. The planet rewards those who acknowledge its rules. Jake begins to understand that survival here is not about superiority, but synchronization. Language becomes another doorway into this new way of seeing. The Na'vi tongue is not structured for command or hierarchy. It reflects relationship, context, and shared presence. Jake struggles with it, not because it is complex, but because it demands emotional honesty. Words are not detached symbols. They carry weight. To speak incorrectly is not merely to make a mistake, but to misrepresent intent. Through language, Jake starts to recognize how deeply the Na'vi perceive one another. The phrase, "I see you," becomes a turning point. At first, Jake hears it as a greeting. Over time, he understands its depth. To see someone is to acknowledge their existence fully, without projection or judgment. It is recognition of spirit as much as form. This concept challenges Jake in ways combat never did. As a soldier, seeing an enemy meant identifying a target. Among the Na'vi, seeing someone means accepting responsibility for how you treat them. Hunting provides one of Jake's most difficult lessons. Hometree teaches him that taking a life is never casual. When an animal is killed, it must be honored. Its sacrifice must be acknowledged. The act is accompanied by words of thanks, not celebration. Jake struggles with this at first, conditioned by a culture where violence is efficient and impersonal. But as he participates, something shifts. Killing no longer feels like victory. It feels like obligation fulfilled with humility. Connection through Tsahelu deepens this transformation. When Jake bonds with a dire horse, he experiences something entirely new. Control gives way to partnership. The animal is not a vehicle. It is a living being that consents to the bond. Their movements synchronize, not through force, but trust. In that moment, Jake begins to understand the Na'vi relationship with their world, not as symbolism, but as lived reality. As days turn into weeks, Jake's reports to the human base begin to lose their certainty. His descriptions become less clinical, less precise. He struggles to translate what he is experiencing into language that reduces Pandora to data points. Some things resist extraction. Some truths lose meaning when removed from context. Jake does not yet realize it, but he is already failing at his assigned task, not through rebellion, but through honesty. The most profound change occurs quietly. Jake starts to feel shame, not imposed shame, not fear of punishment, but internal recognition. He sees the Na'vi generosity, their patience with his ignorance, their willingness to teach someone who represents a history of intrusion and violence. He sees how little they take and how much they preserve. In contrast, the human presence begins to feel heavy, loud, and fragile. Pandora is no longer a backdrop to Jake's mission. It is the framework through which he now evaluates truth. The forest teaches him timing. The Na'vi teach him balance. Hometree teaches him discipline rooted in care rather than dominance. And through all of it, Jake begins to see himself differently. He is no longer a broken man borrowing strength. He is someone being reshaped by perspective. Learning to see through Na'vi eyes does not erase Jake's past. It reframes it. His military instincts do not vanish. They are tempered, redirected, questioned. He starts to understand that courage is not measured by how much damage one can endure or inflict, but by the willingness to protect what cannot protect itself. This realization is subtle, but irreversible. By the end of this chapter, Jake Sully is still divided between two worlds, but the balance has shifted. He no longer sees Pandora as a mission space. He sees it as a living presence, deserving of loyalty. The forest no longer feels hostile. It feels attentive. And for the first time since leaving Earth, Jake is not simply moving through life. He is participating in it. Belonging does not arrive suddenly for Jake Sully. It grows slowly, cautiously, like roots seeking stable ground. Among the Hometree clan, trust is not given because of intention or effort. It is earned through consistency, humility, and time. Jake is watched long before he is welcomed. Every action is observed. Every mistake remembered. The Na'vi do not rush judgment, but neither do they forget. For the first time since arriving on Pandora, Jake is not evaluated by rank, utility, or potential value. He is evaluated by who he proves himself to be. As his training continues, Jake begins to move with greater confidence, not the confidence of dominance, but of familiarity. He learns the rhythms of the forest, the unspoken cues that guide daily life within the clan. He participates in hunts, contributes to communal tasks, and listens more than he speaks. Slowly, resistance softens. Suspicion gives way to cautious acceptance. The Hometree do not celebrate him, but they make space for him. In their world, that alone is meaningful. Hometree remains central to this transition. She watches Jake closely, measuring his progress not by skill alone, but by intention. When he succeeds, she does not praise him. When he fails, she does not excuse him. Her approval is subtle, expressed through trust rather than words. When she allows Jake to stand beside her during rituals, when she corrects him without anger, when she expects more from him than survival, these moments signal something deeper. Jake is no longer merely being taught, he is being considered. Belonging, however, brings responsibility. As Jake grows closer to the clan, the weight of what he knows becomes heavier. The reports he sends back to the human base now carry real consequences. What was once abstract information is now tied to faces, voices, and shared experiences. Locations are no longer coordinates, they are homes. Resources are no longer materials, they are lifelines. Each transmission feels less like duty and more like erosion. The Hometree eventually invite Jake into the heart of their identity. He is allowed to participate in ceremonies that define community and continuity. He hears the songs that carry memory forward. He learns the stories of ancestors whose lives remain present through Eywa. These are not performances meant for outsiders. They are acts of trust. To witness them is to be acknowledged as more than a visitor. Jake feels the significance of this deeply, even as it sharpens his internal conflict. It is during this period that Jake begins to understand the true meaning of home. Home is not a structure or a territory. It is a network of relationships, obligations, and shared survival. The Hometree's bond to Hometree is not symbolic. It is practical, spiritual, and historical all at once. The massive tree shelters generations, holds memory, and anchors identity. To lose it would not simply mean relocation, it would mean dislocation of self. This understanding makes Jake's silence unbearable. He knows that beneath Hometree lies the very resource the humans seek. He knows that negotiations are failing. He knows that military solutions are being prepared. And still, he hesitates. Each day he delays feels like protection. Each night he knows it is also deception. Trust, once earned, becomes fragile. The closer Jake grows to the clan, the more catastrophic his eventual betrayal will be. Jake's dual life reaches a breaking point not through exposure, but through realization. He understands that neutrality is no longer possible. Remaining silent is no longer passive. It is an active choice with devastating implications. The Na'vi have welcomed him as one of their own, while the humans continue to see him as a means to an end. Between these two perspectives lies a truth Jake can no longer ignore. Belonging demands loyalty, and loyalty demands sacrifice. When the truth finally surfaces, it does not explode outward, it collapses inward. Jake's attempt to warn the Omaticaya comes too late, filtered through guilt and hesitation. The revelation is not received with anger alone, but with something far more devastating: disbelief, hurt. The realization that trust was misplaced cuts deeper than any physical wound. Neytiri's reaction is not loud. It is distant. The bond they have built fractures in silence. The weight of betrayal is heavy precisely because it was avoidable. Jake is not condemned as a villain. He is seen as a failure to speak sooner, a failure to choose when it mattered most. Among the Na'vi, intention does not erase consequence. The damage is real, regardless of remorse. Jake is forced to confront the truth that good intentions do not absolve harmful outcomes. As the humans prepare to act, the Omaticaya withdraw. The space Jake once occupied closes around him. Where there was trust, there is now caution. Where there was belonging, there is now distance. This shift is not dramatized through spectacle. It is conveyed through absence, the absence of shared glances, the absence of invitation, the absence of connection. Jake feels this loss acutely because, for the first time, he understands what he is losing. This chapter marks the emotional center of Jake Sully's journey. He has gained perspective, connection, and purpose, only to realize that these things demand accountability. Belonging is not a reward, it is a responsibility. Trust, once broken, cannot be restored through explanation alone. It requires action that carries risk. By the end of this part, Jake stands at the edge of two worlds with no place to retreat. Earth is gone to him, morally and emotionally. Pandora, wounded by his silence, no longer offers shelter. What remains is choice, stripped of illusion. The comfort of observation has ended. The era of consequence has begun. The fall of Hometree is not framed as a battle. It is framed as a decision. Long before the first missile is armed, the outcome has already been chosen in rooms far removed from the forest itself. Strategy replaces dialogue. Efficiency replaces empathy. What unfolds is not the chaos of war, but the cold execution of intent. Hometree does not fall because negotiations fail. It falls because it is inconvenient to wait. For the Omaticaya, Hometree is not merely a place of shelter. It is the physical embodiment of continuity. Generations have lived within its vast structure, its roots entwined with memory, its height marking a connection between earth and sky. Children are born beneath its canopy. Elders return to Eywa within its living heart. To attack Hometree is not to threaten property. It is to assault identity itself. Jake understands this fully now, and that knowledge becomes a source of torment. He tries to intervene, to delay the inevitable, to reason with those who still view the situation as a logistical problem. His words fall flat against the momentum of command. Compassion is treated as obstruction. Time is treated as liability. In that moment, Jake realizes the limits of his influence. He was useful when he provided information. He is disposable when he asks for restraint. As the human forces mobilize, the contrast between the two worlds becomes unbearable. On one side, machines hum, weapons calibrate, pilots receive clear instructions. On the other, the Omaticaya gather not for war, but for prayer. They sing, they prepare rituals, they trust that Eywa, which has sustained them for generations, will continue to do so. There is no denial here, only faith rooted in lived experience. When the assault begins, it is swift and overwhelming. The sky fills with the sound of engines, drowning out the forest's quiet rhythms. Missiles strike with mechanical precision. Fire tears through branches that have stood for centuries. The tree shudders, not as an object collapsing, but as a living being in pain. The Na'vi do not scream in panic. They scream in grief. Jake witnesses this from a place of helpless clarity. He is present, but powerless. His warnings came too late. His loyalty shifted too slowly. Every explosion feels personal, not because he fired the weapons, but because he helped make their use possible. The fall of Hometree is not only a physical destruction. It is the collapse of Jake's remaining illusions about neutrality. Within the chaos, moments of humanity persist. Parents shield children. Warriors try to hold collapsing pathways long enough for others to escape. Elders remain behind, choosing to return to Eywa rather than flee. These choices are not dramatized as heroism. They are portrayed as inevitabilities shaped by belief. The Na'vi do not cling to survival at any cost. They cling to meaning. The tree finally gives way under the sustained assault. Its fall is slow, almost reverent, as if the forest itself recognizes the significance of the moment. When it hits the ground, the impact is more than physical. It echoes through the collective consciousness of the clan. A lineage has been severed. A promise has been broken. The land itself seems to mourn. In the aftermath, silence settles over the ruins. Smoke drifts through what was once a thriving community. The survivors stand among debris and ash, not in shock, but in hollow recognition. They have seen this before in stories passed down through generations. They know what it means when balance is shattered. And they know that there can be no return to what was. Neytiri's grief is quiet and devastating. She does not lash out immediately. She mourns her father, her home, and the trust she extended to Jake. Her pain is not directed outward at first. It turns inward, sharpening into resolve. In her eyes, Jake sees the cost of his hesitation more clearly than any accusation could convey. For the human forces, the mission is declared a success. The objective has been cleared. Losses are calculated, justified, absorbed into reports. There is no celebration, but there is satisfaction. The obstacle has been removed. The path forward appears open. What they fail to understand is that they have not ended resistance. They have created it. The fall of Hometree marks the point of no return. For the Na'vi, coexistence with the human presence is no longer imaginable. For Jake, reconciliation through diplomacy is no longer possible. The destruction of the tree strips away every remaining argument for patience. There is nothing left to protect through compromise. Emotionally, this moment redefines Jake's journey. He is no longer a conflicted observer trapped between loyalties. He is a witness to irreversible harm. The guilt he carries transforms into clarity. The question is no longer who he should support. It is how he will respond to what has been done. The fall of Hometree is not the climax of the story, but it is its moral turning point. It exposes the true cost of delay, the danger of half measures, and the violence inherent in systems that prioritize extraction over existence. It also reveals the resilience of those who survive. Amid the destruction, the Na'vi do not disappear. They gather. They remember. They prepare. As the smoke clears, Jake stands among the ruins of a world that trusted him. There is no forgiveness waiting here, no easy redemption. What remains is responsibility. The forest has spoken through loss. Eywa has been wounded. And from this moment forward, Jake Sully's path is no longer shaped by what he hopes to prevent, but by what he must now confront. Leadership on Pandora is not inherited, appointed, or declared. It is revealed through action when all other options have failed. After the fall of Hometree, Jake Sully is no longer a guest, a student, or a divided man searching for balance. He is something far more dangerous and far more necessary, a reminder of loss standing in the open. The Omaticaya do not reject him with violence. They turn away from him in silence. That silence is heavier than accusation, because it leaves Jake alone with the consequences of his choices and no clear path toward redemption. Exile forces clarity. Stripped of belonging, Jake confronts the reality that apologies cannot restore what has been destroyed. Words cannot rebuild a fallen home, nor can regret resurrect the dead. If he is to remain on Pandora, it will not be as someone seeking forgiveness, but as someone willing to carry the burden of action. This realization does not arrive as inspiration. It arrives as necessity. Jake understands that if the Na'vi are to survive what is coming, they will need more than grief and anger. They will need unity. And unity requires a symbol strong enough to be seen across clans, histories, and rivalries. That symbol has a name whispered through generations: Toruk Makto. The rider of Toruk, the great Leonopteryx, is not a title earned through training or lineage. It is a role that appears only in times of great crisis. Toruk is not merely the apex predator of the skies. It is a force of legend, feared and revered in equal measure. To bond with it is to challenge death itself. To survive that bond is to be marked by Eywa as a bringer of change. Jake's decision to face Toruk is not driven by confidence. It is driven by resolve sharpened through failure. He knows that success is unlikely and survival uncertain, but he also knows that waiting guarantees extinction. The act itself is not framed as conquest. It is framed as surrender to risk. Jake does not seek to dominate Toruk. He seeks to be accepted by it, knowing full well that rejection will mean death. The encounter is raw and unceremonious. There is no spectacle designed for glory. There is only motion, instinct, and survival. When Jake leaps onto Toruk, the struggle that follows is violent and unyielding. The creature resists with the full force of its power, and Jake meets it not with control but with persistence. The bond, when it finally forms, is not triumphant. It is solemn. Two forces acknowledge one another, not as master and weapon, but as participants in something larger than either alone. When Jake returns riding Toruk, the effect is immediate and profound. The Na'vi do not cheer. They do not rush forward in celebration. They fall silent. Memory stirs. Stories once spoken as myth take physical form before their eyes. Toruk Makto has returned, not as a reminder of past victories, but as a signal that the present moment demands extraordinary response. In that silence, leadership is not granted by Jake's words, but by the weight of what he has done. This moment marks the true birth of Jake Sully as a leader, not because he has proven strength, but because he has embraced responsibility without certainty of reward. He does not claim authority over the Na'vi. He asks for their trust, openly acknowledging his failures and his role in their suffering. There is no attempt to justify or soften the truth. Jake speaks not as a savior, but as someone who understands the cost of inaction and refuses to repeat it. Neytiri's response is the most telling. Her acceptance is not immediate, nor is it unconditional. It is measured, grounded in the understanding that leadership does not erase pain. But she sees something new in Jake, something that was not present before. He is no longer torn between worlds. He has chosen one fully, knowing that choice may cost him everything. In Na'vi culture, such commitment carries weight. As Toruk Makto, Jake becomes a unifying force not through command, but through example. He does not erase differences between clans. He acknowledges them and calls for cooperation in spite of them. His leadership is not rooted in fear or superiority, but in shared survival. He understands military strategy, but he applies it through the lens of Pandora, not Earth. He listens to the land, to the people, and to Eywa itself. This transformation is what separates Jake from the humans he once served. They rely on hierarchy and firepower. Jake relies on connection and collective purpose. Where they seek control, he seeks alignment. Where they impose will, he invites choice. The difference is subtle, but it is decisive. Toruk Makto is not a crown. It is a burden carried openly. Jake does not promise victory. He promises resistance with meaning. He promises that Pandora will not fall quietly. In doing so, he becomes something Earth never allowed him to be. Not a weapon, not a resource, but a leader defined by accountability. By the end of this chapter, Jake Sully stands fully within the world that has reshaped him. The broken soldier who arrived from a dying planet is gone. In his place stands someone forged by loss, bound by connection, and willing to stand between destruction and what remains. The birth of Toruk Makto is not the end of Jake's journey. It is the moment his purpose becomes undeniable. War does not erupt on Pandora in chaos. It arrives with precision. Plans are drawn, routes calculated, objectives prioritized. For the human forces, this conflict is framed as a necessary operation, a final step toward securing control. For the Na'vi, it is something far older and far more personal. It is the moment when survival and identity become inseparable, when the right to exist must be defended not through words, but through action. Jake Sully understands both sides of this equation, and that understanding shapes the way the conflict unfolds. As Toruk Makto, he does not call for reckless retaliation. He calls for preparation rooted in knowledge of the land. Pandora is not merely their home. It is their greatest ally. Where human forces depend on machines and firepower, the Na'vi depend on terrain, timing, and connection. The forest is not a battlefield to them. It is a living participant. The human strategy is direct and overwhelming. Air power leads the advance, supported by heavily armed ground units, designed to neutralize resistance quickly. Their confidence comes from experience. They have won wars like this before, on worlds that could not answer back. Pandora, however, does not remain silent. As the first machines push deeper into the wilderness, resistance begins not with a frontal assault, but with disruption. Pathways collapse. Visibility fades. The jungle closes in. Jake coordinates the clans not as an army, but as a network. Each group moves with purpose, striking where the enemy is exposed and withdrawing before retaliation can land. There is no attempt to match firepower with force. Instead, the Na'vi exploit the limits of technology. Machines struggle in terrain they cannot adapt to. Communication breaks down. Precision gives way to confusion. The forest absorbs the noise of war and turns it against those who brought it. Above the canopy, the skies become contested ground. Ikran riders move with speed and intuition, attacking from angles no human pilot anticipates. The presence of Toruk at the forefront is not tactical alone. It is psychological. Fear spreads through human ranks as myth becomes reality. What was dismissed as legend now casts a shadow over every maneuver. Morale weakens, not because defeat is certain, but because control is no longer absolute. On the ground, the cost of resistance becomes clear. The Na'vi fight with courage, but they are not invulnerable. Loss is immediate and personal. Every fallen warrior is known by name. Every injury is felt by the community. Yet, there is no retreat. The stakes are too high. This war is not about victory in the abstract. It is about preventing erasure. The turning point does not come from strategy alone. It comes from Eywa's response. As the battle intensifies and destruction threatens to spread unchecked, the planet itself intervenes. Creatures of land and air converge, not as weapons, but as guardians. Hammerhead titanotheres charge through mechanized lines. Predators strike in coordinated bursts. This is not portrayed as divine punishment, but as balance asserting itself. Pandora acts to preserve what sustains it. For Jake, this moment is both humbling and affirming. Leadership does not mean command over nature. It means alignment with it. Eywa does not answer him because he demands it. She responds because the threat endangers the entire system. The distinction matters. It reinforces the core truth the humans have failed to grasp. Pandora cannot be owned, only respected. The final confrontation brings Jake face to face with the embodiment of the human approach to war. The clash is intimate, stripped of spectacle. Machines fail. Masks shatter. Survival comes down to adaptability rather than dominance. In this moment, the conflict between worlds is distilled into a single truth. One side fights to extract. The other fights to endure. When the battle ends, it does not conclude with celebration. The victory is hard won and heavy with loss. The forest stands, but it is scarred. The Na'vi have defended their home, but at great cost. The human forces retreat, not because they have been destroyed, but because they have been denied control. Their technology remains powerful, but powerless against a world that refuses submission. Exile becomes the final resolution. Those who came to take are sent away. The remaining humans are those who chose understanding over exploitation, knowledge over conquest. The war for Pandora ends not with annihilation, but with separation. Two worlds that cannot coexist along the same principles are forced apart. For Jake Sully, the war marks the completion of his transformation. He is no longer acting out of guilt or redemption. He acts out of responsibility. The choice he makes afterward is not framed as escape from humanity, but as commitment to Pandora. The conflict has clarified what he is willing to defend and what he is willing to leave behind. War for Pandora is not portrayed as triumph over an enemy. It is portrayed as resistance against inevitability. It challenges the assumption that progress must come at the cost of living systems. It asks whether survival built on destruction can ever be called success. In answering that question, Pandora does not offer a speech or a verdict. It offers endurance. As the smoke clears and the forest begins its slow recovery, one truth remains undeniable. Pandora lives. And because it lives, the story does not end here. It pauses, waiting for the next challenge, the next choice, and the next test of whether what was learned will be remembered. The war for Pandora ends without applause. There are no banners raised, no declarations of triumph echoing through the forest. What remains is quiet, heavy, and reflective, the kind of silence that follows survival rather than victory. The Na'vi have endured. Their world still stands. But endurance, Jake Sully learns, is not the same as peace. It is simply the space in which the future must now be built. In the days that follow the departure of the human forces, Pandora begins to heal in its own time. The forest regrows where fire once fell. Creatures return cautiously to familiar paths. Life resumes, not as it was, but as it must be. Loss has altered the rhythm of existence, and memory has been etched into the land itself. The Na'vi do not rush to forget what has happened. They remember, because remembrance is part of balance. For Jake, the aftermath is deeply personal. He stands at the edge of two identities, but for the first time, the path forward is clear. His human body remains, fragile and temporary, a reminder of the life he once lived and the world he can no longer return to in spirit. Pandora is not a refuge from humanity. It has become his responsibility. The decision he faces is not framed as escape, but as commitment. The ritual at the Tree of Souls is not presented as spectacle. It is intimate, reverent, and final. Jake's consciousness is transferred permanently into his Na'vi body, not through technology alone, but through the collective will of the people and the living network of Eywa. This moment does not erase his past. It honors it, then releases it. Jake does not become someone else. He becomes fully himself for the first time. His new life begins quietly. There is no coronation. Leadership among the Na'vi is not sustained by titles, but by service. Jake remains Toruk Makto in memory and meaning, but in daily life he is a partner, a hunter. He builds a family with Neytiri, not as a symbol of unity between worlds, but as an expression of shared values and trust earned through hardship. Together, they represent continuity rather than conquest. Time passes, and with it comes growth. Children are born. Stories are told. The clan adapts to a new reality shaped by experience. Jake learns that leadership does not end when conflict subsides. It evolves. Protecting Pandora now means vigilance without paranoia, strength without domination, and memory without bitterness. These lessons are harder than war. They require patience rather than adrenaline. Yet the film does not allow the audience to believe in permanence. Pandora's survival is not framed as an endpoint. It is a pause. Humanity, after all, has not changed its nature simply because it lost a battle. Earth is still dying. The forces that drove the first invasion remain intact, waiting, recalculating. Progress, as defined by those systems, does not accept refusal easily. The storm to come is foreshadowed not through immediate threat, but through implication. Technology remembers. Ambition persists. The knowledge gained during the conflict cannot be erased. Pandora has revealed itself as both valuable and vulnerable, a truth that will not remain ignored. The absence of human ships in the sky is temporary, not permanent. Jake understands this more clearly than anyone. He does not cling to the illusion that victory has secured forever. Instead, he prepares his people for resilience. Survival, he knows, will require adaptation without compromise of principle. The Na'vi must remain who they are, even as the world around them grows more dangerous. This is the challenge that defines his future as a leader. What makes this ending resonate is its restraint. The story does not promise that goodness will prevail without cost. It does not suggest that harmony, once restored, will remain unchallenged. Instead, it offers a quieter truth. That life is worth defending even when defense must be repeated. That belonging is not proven once, but reaffirmed continuously. That home is not safe because it is hidden, but because it is loved. Jake Sully's journey comes full circle here. He began as a broken soldier from a dying world, disconnected from purpose and identity. He becomes a guardian of a living world, fully aware of its fragility and its strength. His transformation is not about abandoning humanity. It is about rejecting the version of humanity that believes survival must come at the expense of everything else. The final image is not one of closure, but of vigilance. Pandora breathes, the Na'vi endure, and beyond the horizon, unseen but inevitable, the future waits. The storm has not passed. It has merely gathered distance. When it returns, the world it seeks to claim will no longer be unprepared. This is not the end of the story. It is the foundation upon which the next chapter will rise. A chapter shaped by consequence, memory, and the understanding that some worlds are not meant to be conquered, only protected.